the goal for today really is to answer some of these questions and to help you ask the right questions so that you can begin to plan and make decisions that are really going to be right for you in your retirement. Both Ben and I are firm believers in planning, and that planning is absolutely key to enjoying a successful retirement experience. So how many of you in the room are retired right now? Okay, so we've got about half the room that is retired. Are those that are approaching retirement, how far away are you from that, do you think?
Maybe a couple of years.
Okay.
Maybe.
All right. Okay. What about online?
Nothing coming through just yet online,
Okay.
but I will share that if
All right.
someone does.
Good.
Okay, retired. We've got one retired.
Okay. All
Maybe
right.
tomorrow.
Maybe tomorrow.
So we titled this workshop.
Try again.
So we titled this workshop, The New Retirement. And that's because retirement is not what it used to be. It has changed significantly from what our parents' retirement was like. And so this is a whole new stage of life that did not exist when our parents retired. Today, tomorrow's retirement, it's going to have a whole new timing, whole new meaning, and a whole new purpose. So one of the challenges is for all of us that are retiring right now is that we don't have any role models that are kind of showing us the way. And so as a result, we baby boomers are kind of having to forge new paths. And that's not always easy. And so remember too, that this is going to be the time of life that could actually, our retirement years could actually be longer than our career work years. We could have more years in retirement. So, in addition, I think to having no clear guidelines, we were not really taught to think of this new kind of chapter as a period of personal growth. And that is where we're seeing probably the biggest shift. And that is that all other generations kind of looked at retirement as here you are, and it's just kind of a downward slide. We are seeing now through all the medical studies that have been done that personal growth is so important to making this the health, a time of our life when we can be healthy and we can be happy. So, I think it's no wonder that some of us might feel a little bit off kilter and in need of some direction as we're kind of shifting or making that transition into that new chapter. So, as we look at aging, we all know people who we would say, ooh, they are aging so well. We probably all know some that we would put in that category. We also know some that we would say, not so well. And so I want you to think about everyone that you know that is kind of in at that stage of life. And think about what it is that makes those two different. Is there something that one is doing that the other one is not doing? And so for those who are aging, who do say, wow, they are really aging well, what is it that has made them so successful at aging? What are your thoughts? Thinking about the people that you know. And again, for those that are online, love to hear what your thoughts are on that. Yeah.
So this is just personally some people that I know, they never want to stop learning.
Okay. They don't want to stop learning. That's a good one. What else? What do you hear, Ben, from?
Yeah. So obviously we have the opportunity to see a lot of different folks, right, come and go, and we see the ones that do well and the ones that don't, and I'd say it's probably the biggest dividing line is the ones that stay active and engaged. And that could be in a broad definition, if you active and engaged physically, mentally, with your family, whatever it is, but staying active and engaged tends to separate those that, are aging well. And that's where sometimes definitely will say, it's the difference between wearing out and rusting out. Right?
Yeah, that's good. Wearing out and rusting out. Yeah, Dave.
So Cindy online shared that staying active and involved in her community. And then Alice shared staying active, taking classes and traveling.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
I think health has an impact
Mhm.
because I know people who have had catastrophic health issues during the period of time when they
Yeah.
thought they were going to be traveling,
Oh,
staying
yeah.
engaged, then now they can't do this.
Right. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
I think intimacy needs to, like, can play a huge role. And, get to know each other, like maybe you did when you were young,
Yeah.
but also, like, I remember having children to a counselor, and they were talking about their marriage, and he said, well, it's normal, sometimes we fight, or they could be more intimate, and he said, but in that, they said, in that normal, he goes, well, do you want to be normal, or do you want to be great?
Mm.
Oh,
So,
good
you
one.
know, it's more or less like, so get busy
Yeah,
with each other.
right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Good. Anybody else? Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
The only thing I stopped doing when I retired, I stopped giving work.
Okay.
I was able to actually extend and enlarge other things that I was already involved in. And I found that to be very helpful. And as you might recall, my involvement with singing has led to the equivalent of a music
That's
major
right.
at Otterbein through the senior college program.
Right. So he's back in school.
Just started this
Right.
afternoon.
Exactly. Wonderful. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about that.
Yeah.
And how important those kind of
But that was
things
the
are.
only thing that went down. Everything else
Yeah.
stayed at or above where it
Yeah.
had been.
Good.
So that was a good thing. And more time for my wife, more time for the family, more time for church, more time for music, more time for art,
Mhm.
that I've been able to
Right.
to devote as well.
Good. So I encourage all of you to, if you don't have any role models, or think about people that you were thinking about who you think aged really well, jot down the name of a few people and then really meet with them and kind of pick their brains on what they think has been helpful, and why you think that they are kind of a role model for that, and to talk about that. Oops.
Should be
Yeah,
good.
so just for a minute, I've got to touch on mindset. I think that one thing that is very fundamental about making this a great time in life is your mindset. So, and having, when we think about what is the right mindset, well, there is a professor, Carol Dweck, some of you might know of her, but she's really been the pioneer on writing a lot about mindset. And so she has written this book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, that has been a very popular book. And according to her, there are two primary mindsets, that we either have a fixed mindset or we have a growth mindset. If we've got that fixed mindset, then we kind of look at things like, okay, well, this is the way it is. There's nothing I can do about it. And, I'm kind of stuck. We're kind of stuck. This is the way it is. The other mindset is where we actually believe that we have the ability to change that and that we can make that different than what it is. And so, but I think understanding what kind of mind frame you're living in is extremely important. especially as you enter retirement? Are you looking at retirement as an opportunity to grow? We heard somebody talk about that, of looking at it as an opportunity. Are you looking at it as a time to thrive, to do and to learn some new things that maybe you've never had time to do before because you've been so busy with your career? But whatever mindset that you have is going to have a huge impact on the way that you approach your transition into retirement. And so, you know, those with a growth mindset really look at retirement as this is a brand new beginning, a new start. And rather than looking at retirement as kind of an end. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind as we're going through this, and kind of think about yourself. You know, where, you know, on an everyday basis, where are you with that in terms of your mindset? Okay. So as I said, Ben and I, true believers in planning, you know, for retirement, but finding the best for yourself in retirement, it involves planning in a lot of different areas. And these are 6 of the key areas that we look at planning for. All that you do can be divided into these 6 arenas of living. And so, and at any time, we all perform different actions in any one of these areas. But these are kind of the 6 arenas where that can give us kind of a functional blueprint of how we want to plan our retirement. Just as a side note, the healthiest, the happiest people are the ones that have some balance with all 6 of that. They don't spend all of their time in just 1 or 2 areas, but there is a bit of balance. Is the happiest people, is what the studies show. So, you know, as we look at each one of these, I wanted to just briefly, first of all, take a look at the career and profession. And you may be wondering or asking, why am I looking at career when I'm leaving the career? And the reason for that is that there are a number of non-financial benefits of our careers that have got to be replaced in order for us to be truly happy in retirement. And so these include the first one, which is a big one for a lot of people, is identity. This is how you define, how you see yourself in the world. So for in retirement, that is a big, you know, is a big shift many times for our identity, particularly here in America. And that's because so many of us define ourselves by our work and status that is attached to that.
The first question that people often ask you when they're first introduced is, what do you do?
What do you do? Yeah, right. Exactly. So that's a big one. And I'm surprised we didn't hear that, because that's usually with my clients, that's probably one of the biggest concerns people have. I don't know if I want to retire. What, you know, I just can't even imagine. So, and know that the more that you are defined by your job, the harder it is going to be to adjust to life without that career. That's just the reality of it. So how many of you think you will struggle here? You think you will, Mary, a little bit? I did. That's been a huge struggle for me.
I
Did
thought
you have a little?
I thought I did, but because of the way that I was retired, I say it that way because I didn't get to pick the date. I just was told,
Okay.
today's your retirement day.
Okay.
Yeah, I had balls in the air that were gonna come down. I had to figure out what to do with them.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons I had not picked a retirement date was because I did not know what I would do.
Yeah.
Well, now I was the waiting was over. And that was how I got evolved into the things that I
The things that
have
you've chosen to do.
have been doing. Yeah.
Right.
But it was not anticipated, but it was there to grab onto.
Yeah.
I think that might be a good way to
Yeah.
put that.
I think that is.
Because I was already involved in several of the things that I'm
Right.
still doing.
Right, yeah. Anybody online with feels that they'll struggle with that? So it really is this yeah.
What you just said before. Said
Um,
something about how they
This is
finds
the,
them or something, you said,
what did I say?
identity.
Identity.
Finds them or, yeah, or, oh, that's their.
How,
the identity.
yeah, how you look at yourself and, you know, who are you?
You
Without
had
that
said
job.
That it was the thing that most people struggle with.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
big
that's
one.
what we were trying to pick up.
and the more that it might be this big, the more that you're defined by your job, the harder time you're gonna have, particularly when you first start out in retirement. So you've got to come up with a plan of how you're going to replace that. So it's looking at focusing on who are you beyond your career? Who are you beyond what you did for a living or what's on your business card? And so that takes some planning. The second area that we know that has to be replaced is this feeling of worthwhile. And that is where feeling that what you're doing matters. At work, we totally know, you know, what it is, what our contribution is, usually with our employer. So that is something that is very important to people. And they think, oh gosh, if I leave work, how am I gonna feel that what I'm doing, you know, matters in some way? And then the third one, and we hear a lot of people talk about that, socialization for some. So you know, as we look at our work, it brings us into close relationships with all different kinds of people. You know, we develop relationships, we form friendships with those people at work. So that social network has got to be replaced in some way when we leave the workforce. And then the last one is just when we look at our time management or our routine, you know, when we look at our at work, it absolutely gives our life some structure. And so, and more importantly, it really kind of manages our time as well. So we need to, though, in some ways, we also need to kind of manage our time in retirement. Now, that's not to say, we all have said here, we want the flexibility. We don't want to be, you know, have maybe that routine or that schedule the way we had to have it at work. But just statistically, from what makes us the happiest and the healthiest is that we still, even in retirement, we need a little bit of that time management piece. And our requirement for all four of these doesn't just go away simply because we retire. So it's crucial that we come up with a plan of how each one of these are going to be replaced. According to the medical research, the big concern on this is if we do not do that, we will kind of slowly wear away, both mentally and physically. And that's just what the numbers and what the statistics and the studies are showing us. So where, for all of you, where do you think you'd struggle the most?
Wait, can you say that again? What's the?
Well, slowly, if we don't have some time management in our retirement, find a replacement for the socialization. All of these that were benefits, they're non-financial benefits of our work. If we don't find some kind of replacement for these, we will slowly wear away. Yeah. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that, especially on the socialization. There's so much out there talking about isolation and with older people, how critical it is keeping them, with, engaging with other people. So any of you, is there anything that you feel is where you think that you will struggle the most? Whatever that might be, that's probably the best place to start on your planning. And this is where I take people who have not retired yet, might be 4 years down the road. This is the first place I bring, is to start to think how you will do that. Because the other piece that we know is that 70% of people in the United States that retire, 70% say that for the first 5 years of retirement, they struggle and are not necessarily happy, that they struggle with it. Our thoughts are, if you have a plan in place and then you retire, knowing that, having something in place, that makes the difference, that you wouldn't fall into that category.
So an online comment is that the socialization part could be particularly difficult, especially if your spouse or partner, you aren't in agreement of how to, one person's maybe a hermit crab, another person's more outgoing, and then it's just reconciling that as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is one thing we have
They're
to
not
think out.
alive,
Or if they're not even
Yeah.
alive, right?
Right.
then it's different.
Right. You were saying that you're continuing to work, just to let you know.
Yeah.
82% of the population is working until the age of 65 or don't even plan to retire. 82% is what they're saying right now. So what we're seeing is a combination of a lot of different things. We're seeing people doing volunteer work. We're seeing self-employment. We're seeing becoming a consultant, maybe a little bit of, maybe going a whole different direction, but still wanting to work. But interests lead them a different way. And maybe you don't have to make as much as you did in your career. So, and pursuing seats on the boards, maintaining memberships in professional organizations. All of those are things that fall into kind of that career in the professional category. So then another life arena that we know we have got to plan for is all the financial aspects of retirement. So I'm going to hand this over to Ben, who is our financial expert in this area.
Thank you.
Good job, Howard.
All right. Well, thank you. We're going to see Holly back up here, but what a great start. What a great start. And I just want to take a second to comment on the things that we've covered so far, right? And the fact that, as Holly hit on a couple of times, the importance of the planning. And Fred, your comment a second ago about, how that transition to retirement occurred for you. I can't tell you how many times over my years of doing this. So I've been at Baird with my current partner for 15 years, but in total, actually starting when I was an intern here at Otterbein. That's how I met my business partner in 2004. So we're coming up on 20 years of working together. So the great thing that I tell people all the time, the absolute phenomenal thing about what I get to do every day is I get to learn from all of you, right? I get to learn from all of you. It's phenomenal.
It's awesome.
And what I mean by that is just, Fred's comment is a great example of what we've seen so many times where folks could be ready to retire financially. And this is actually what hit my business partner, Jeff, and myself early on. Folks could be ready to retire financially, and we can keep telling them, you're ready, you're ready, you're ready, but they don't want to go, right? It kind of reminds me of your story that you told, Fred, and then they, it's forced upon them in one way or another, right? And the reason I think that's so important is because it comes down to the work that Holly is doing. And this is the stuff that really we changed within our practice. Now, I first met Holly, several years ago, because it's so important, the work that's going on there. It's really changed the way that we think about finances and trying to marry these ideas together So I don't want to disappoint you, but trust me, you're not going to see any fancy graphs. We're not going to nerd out on finance stuff tonight a whole lot. But what I am going to try to build for you today is a framework to think about the financial aspect of your retirement as you approach this and move on through retirement. So I'm going to hit on a few things. Building that vision and purpose, right? A lot of this is Holly's arena, but I'm going to help in connecting those dots to the finance piece. I think one important thing we can talk about is threats to a successful retirement, right? So rather than me stand up here and profess to tell you all that I don't know your particular circumstances, how you should handle your finances, I'd be out of bounds doing that. So rather than do that, I'm going to point out some blind spots. So again, over 20 some years of talking to folks, what have I seen where we've had some gaps or some misses, right? So it's mainly just keeping our eyes open to those things. We'll talk a little bit about some ideas around supporting retirement needs and maybe building a team that helps you make your way through retirement. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with some next steps and maybe a little bit of a takeaway for you. So getting rolling here on the retirement vision, I think it's perfect. It's the new year, right? So a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? I think about this with even just my own New Year's resolutions, right? Everybody can say, I want to lose weight, I want to get in shape, right? That's awesome. But if we don't identify exactly what that looks like, how is it ever going to turn into an actual reality? So we're going to talk a bit about that. So 3 important steps here. Defining your purpose, illuminate the ingredients of a life well lived. I'm going to take a second here and read a question, and whether you're closing your eyes or just thinking about this, right? I think this is a great place to start of building what your retirement vision really looks like. And trust me, this isn't mine. I didn't invent this, right? This came from a gentleman by the name of George Kinder. If you've heard of him, he comes from the Kinder Life Planning Institute. He's done some phenomenal work in this arena. So his question that he poses, there's actually 3 questions, but I'm just going to do one this evening. His question he poses, it goes, imagine you are financially secure, that you have enough money to take care of your needs now and into the future. How would you live your life? Would you change anything? Let yourself go. Don't hold back on your dreams. Describe a life that is complete and richly yours. If you take a second and let that sink in, right? The idea is that you're envisioning whether you're in retirement now and you want to change the trajectory you're on, you're approaching retirement. The purpose is really identifying what is that vision that you see yourself. It was interesting when I went through some of this work with another coach. They asked me to think about what I wanted to look like when I was 100 years old. I got a ways to go, right? Not to state the obvious, we all do, right? But it's even to think about retirement, even as you're really approaching retirement, sometimes that's a very difficult task. But absolutely allowing yourself to dream and think about what is it that looks like. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. And here's where I think some of the importance of that comes into play when we start to connect the dots of you have this vision of whatever it is that it might be. I talked with another lady and she said she wanted to be in a small town in northern Michigan selling trinkets. Love it. Love it. That is very clear and explicit, right? So what does it take? What are all the investments you make, financial and non-financial, to get you to that vision, right? That is our goal of what we're trying to tie together. So setting priorities, chart a focus strategy to do the right things in the right order. Here's where we start to build in some of the financial piece, right? So this comes down to your investment plan, your savings plan, if you're still working your way towards, but you're within that, what we call that retirement red zone. Think about football. You're almost there. What does that savings plan look like? And what does that spending plan look like? The reason I bring these up and want to connect this back to your vision, right, is everything that you're doing around your investments, your savings, your spending should all be tied back to what is that vision, right? Am I connecting those dots? Are my decisions I'm making, are they driven by my vision, or are they starting to be driven by my emotions, maybe, right? So we got to keep that in mind. Making decisions, employ simplified tactics to drive better outcomes. This is something huge that we harp on. And again, the reason we want to build some foundations and some structure into how we go about this is because we're going to be faced with many difficult decisions, especially on the finances, but broadly as what Holly is talking about here, that we feel will be monumental. And the worst thing that we can do is not making the decision to continue to make progress, right? So focus, we always preach, focus on good decisions, don't worry about the perfect decisions, and avoid the terrible ones, right? And we're going to talk about it. And again, this comes down to those three main arenas of investing, saving, spending, right? If we get so worked up, for example, on am I making the absolute best decision when it comes to my investments, or am I making the absolute best decision on when to collect Social Security, all the other money decisions that we'll face as we are approaching and transitioning through retirement, we can't get stuck on the perfect decision. We got to focus on the idea that we can't understand everything that we are going to approach over, let's say, the next 30 or 40 years of our life. And that's the other dynamic that we'll talk about in a second, but retirement is not a destination, right? You're only partway there. You got a long ways to go. And so we've got a lot to think about when it comes to it. So building that framework around making those good decisions. If you are considering a change, ask, what has changed about my plan, right? So if you are looking at your investments, for example, whether you work with an advisor, you're handling this on your own, and you're facing this idea of, I think something should be changed. I always challenge people to ask themselves, what changed about your circumstance or that vision that we always want to be very clear about? What changed about your vision that suggests that this should change, right? The day-to-day whims of media and market and news will come and go. And I always tell people it's kind of like a dial radio. You get stuck between stations and you get more static. That's the noise that can distract us. And the only way we get back out of that is being very clear about what that vision is. So we want to spend a lot of time on that. Lastly, around making decisions, having a co-captain or accountability partner, right? That's part of having a coach like Holly, right? It's having someone who, once you've defined your purpose and your vision and you know, these other items such as socialization, identity, all the things she's already started to go on and many more that will come today, all of those come back to the direction we want to go. And if we have someone that can hold us accountable to what that vision originally was, we're going to be so much more successful in our direction. So as I mentioned, you know, as we lay out that really clear vision, right? We move on to the next step of saying, all right, now what do I need to worry about, right? To some extent, how do I start to translate to the financial element as I move on through retirement, right? So I'm going to run through these 5 things, and please stop me if you want to expand on anything online or here in person. Most of this, what I'm going to try to do, and my list of 5 here, this wasn't from some Yahoo article or anything. This is literally me. This is just my experience of things that I've seen come up over time that I felt like, well, we're gonna stop at a nice round figure of 5, but honestly, I probably could have put a whole laundry list up there of things that I have approached and come across that have faced folks throughout the years of planning for retirement. Accounting for expenses. If you take a second, if I were to sit down with you one-on-one and say, you know, what do you think it costs to live and to cover your monthly expenses, you know, cover your lifestyle and do what you want to do? If I were to ask you that blank question, what would be your immediate thoughts? And you don't need to answer, but if you just were to think about that for yourself, I can tell you the answer I get 9 times out of 10 is people want to start rattling off everything that they pay. My mortgage, my car payment, my utilities, you know, maybe some groceries, something like that, right? But everything I always find as they start to run through that list are all the known quantities, right? It's the things that you repeatedly pay month in and month out, right? What is missed? Things that are missed are things like travel sometimes. Sometimes if that's really important to people, they'll catch that one. But things like birthday gifts, right? Holiday gifts, a new outfit for that trip you're about to go on. So they'll catch travel, but then all the ancillaries that come along with travel, maybe they might start to miss those things. Oh, don't forget, I bought a car before I retired, but that car is probably not going to last you for 30 years, right? Things like oh, shoot, I bought my house and it's probably 20 years old when I retire, and now I'm gonna live in it for maybe another 20 or 30 years. I might want to redo a bathroom or something. All these things can come up throughout their time. And so, having a way of thinking through what are all the things that could possibly come up when it comes to my expenses throughout my retirement, to make sure that I am enjoying and really doing the things that you would have done through your working years, but we don't necessarily think about it because we find a way to fill it in with our cash flow because we keep going to work and that paycheck keeps showing up, right? And now we're in that decumulation phase, and we got to think about there's a finite amount of dollars here, right? The other one around expenses I want to talk about for just a second is inflation. I call this the silent killer.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that I'd say prior to the last 2 years, people would be like, oh, wow, inflation. Yeah, I didn't really think about that. The last 2 years, I think we are all very aware of inflation and the impact inflation can have. Buying groceries. I talked to a lady today and she said she was walking down the grocery aisle and she went to pick this certain kind of bread that she gets and really enjoys, and it's like $6. And she's like, are you kidding me? And she's like, I could not believe it, right? And so this stuff happens, right? So again, it's not about, do we have all the answers? Can we assume perfectly how this is going to play out? No. It comes back to Holly's comment of, we have to have a plan. We have to think about this, right? Around our finances. And then lastly is revisiting that vision exercise we started with. So this is, again, really important for the folks thinking about transitioning to retirement. If that vision hasn't been established yet. If I were to ask you again about, what does it take to live your life? What do you think you're going to need in retirement? If we're not clear about that vision, if you're handing me what your expenses are today, that could drastically change as you transition to retirement. I heard pickleball a few times. Well, if you didn't have time for pickleball in your pre-retirement days, and now maybe you have to join a club where you're enjoying more time for pickleball, that's a new expense, right? The gear that goes along with it. This is a small example of things we got to think about. The next one, what about healthcare? And what goes along with that? We kind of tie these two together, end of life planning. Most common expense, and this seems really silly, but most common expense, I have folks that come in and sit down and share with me around their healthcare that they just had no idea they needed to plan for this or completely missed it out of left field. A root canal. Root canals are not cheap, right? And when you're on Medicare, you're in retirement, there's really no dental coverage there. So you're a cash patient. And it catches people out of left field. And that's just one small example, but obviously there's other things around healthcare. So thinking about your particular health scenarios, and have we accounted for this? What kind of plan needs to be put in place? Are there things that we can do as far as risk mitigation to help us account for those expenses, right? And then around the end of life planning, the bottom line is we all want to age gracefully, right? We all want to age gracefully in our own way and in different ways. And so we tell everyone there's no one plan to figure out what that looks like or to solve for it. But again, the most important thing is having a plan. And so some of the things that we encourage people to think about is your current home. Is your current home one that you could age in place? That's a common theme these days. Folks aren't quick to raise their hand to say, please sign me up for the nursing home, right? If it's not a necessity. People want to age in their home where maybe they're still in the home where they raised their kids, right? They have a lot of memories. They want to age in place if they can, but that isn't always necessarily the safest place to age, right? And so thinking about that, and again, I'll come back to your comment again, Fred, of it keeps sticking in my mind of being forced to do something in retirement. We don't want that change to be forced upon us and sudden, because obviously as we age, we're going to be less akin to this change, right? And so if we can think ahead and understand this is going to be something that comes up, how can we plan for this and think ahead? And obviously there's a lot of great specialists around this idea of homes that are fit to age in place. And this is simple things, having everything on one floor. There's builders in town doing a lot of this in Columbus, quite frankly, for folks around Columbus to have these low maintenance, zero entry type, housing situations that are really easy to age in place. So there is no, one solution for everyone, but again, it's being thoughtful about how do you want to age, who can care for you, what does that cost, how can we mitigate some of those costs, and having a plan in place to solve for that. life expectancy miscalculations, again, this is a big one. I can't tell you how many times I've been told I'm crazy for thinking someone's gonna live into their nineties. People push back on that a lot, but the statistics would show that if it's a couple, there's pretty good odds that one of you are living well into your mid-nineties, right? So again, I think that's something that we have to account for. How long can we making sure that we can make your money last through the decisions that we make well into that time frame? And again, thinking about how your expenses will shift as you age, and going back to that inflation idea, you know, how do different aspects of inflation, such as healthcare, impact different people as we age? The other side of that, though, obviously, one side is living longer as healthcare gets better. The other side of it that we have to be very mindful of, and there's been a lot of work done around this, specifically around women and widows, and we work with quite a few. Unfortunately, that's the unfortunate part of my job, is I see a lot of folks go through this of an untimely loss. And the side of that again, we have to plan for and think ahead of is, you know, if you have two spouses collecting Social Security and you lose one of your spouses, that Social Security goes away, or essentially you get the higher of the two, right? So you're not going to collect all that income. If there was a pension, there would have been pension decisions a long time ago, potentially, when you entered retirement, and those decisions made at that time could have a negative ramification on, are you still going to be collecting that income that you've been depending on, right? So again, thinking about that and saying, okay, maybe I'm not going to take my highest pension payout, but I understand that now this means my spouse is going to be better taken care of because something could happen to me and I might not even make it past my 80s, for example. So again, it doesn't mean there's any one single correct answer. It's more about, do we have a plan in place to account for these things? Investment risks. So I promised we weren't sharing charts, but you can't get out of this without talking about investments, at least for a minute. But we'll keep it pretty high level here. Just more about what are the risks that we see coming into retirement around investments. And it might shock you that actually the thing that concerns me the most for most people is actually being too conservative. Okay. And the reason I say it, it comes back to a statement I made earlier of a lot of folks, and I'm dealing with this with my own father right now, right? We have conversations about this, and you know, naturally, he's got like the 1-800 line. He can pick it up whenever he wants, and he gets that right because he helped pay for this education, so he gets that,
He's
right?
entitled to free
He's
counseling.
entitled to that, absolutely. So with that, you know, being too conservative, we have to understand, again, retirement is not this destination. So a lot of folks think, I really need to radically change the way I'm investing because I'm now at retirement. And again, we can't forget, this money needs to last us for 30 plus years, right? And so if we can't keep up with inflation, we can't keep up with these other items, cost of living adjustments throughout retirement, that can be just as bad as the alternative, which is obviously losing money, right? And that just as we as humans have this emotion of we don't want to have loss. So we'd rather be super conservative, avoid the loss and know that we're safe, and understanding that now there's kind of this, again, kind of this silent killer eroding away your dollars that aren't going to be there for the future. So it's coaching folks through that and understanding the risks, and ultimately making a plan. And I'll connect this dot here with having that plan. Unexpected things can happen. COVID, recent great example. If you had investments, you watched your statements around March of 2020, oh my goodness, you would have thought the world was coming to an end, right? So obviously I was at home, I was stuck at home, and I did nothing but talk to people one after another about what was going on. And the most important thing there, it's one thing if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, still working, you have time. Most people are like, I get it, we'll be fine. We'll get out of this, right? Rightfully so, the folks that would be most nervous are the ones in retirement and relying on income off of their investments, right? If all your income's not coming from Social Security or pensions, you relied on this uncertain world that was right there in front of us. And so it's not that there's any miracle answer of how do you solve that, but again, it's about having a plan. If you work with an advisor or a team, asking them, what is my plan to help me live through these moments of disruption and uncertainty? Because that's not the last one. We're going to have many more. We've had many in our past and we're having many, many more through the rest of your retirement. So having that thing in place that can allow you that peace of mind and get some sleep at night, even when you go through these uncertain times. And then lastly, and again, this is I would say a lesson that I would take away from that COVID era as well. Don't overreact and try to compensate for a bad decision made and compound that bad decision. So a great example would be if we overreacted in that 2020 COVID era, and then suddenly things recover far quicker than everyone would have expected, and then we don't believe it, right? We don't want to believe it because we made a bad decision to begin with, so we don't want to believe it. We say this isn't going to last, and we keep waiting and waiting and waiting, and things keep going higher and higher and higher. And you're waiting for that time that things are get better, and then sure enough, you fold, you throw in the towel and say, okay, I got to get my money working for me again. And it's 2022. And 2022, if the market comes falling down. So now what did you do? You just made a bad decision in 2020, compound in 2022. So we don't want to overreact. And again, a lot of that is coming back to what's our vision? Why would I ever change my game plan and adjust my investment plan for what is occurring today? Last one, being too generous. Now, I don't want to take us away from one of the things that we want to do, which is support our great university, right? But we cannot forget, we need to take care of ourselves first, right? We need to take care of ourselves first. And so I think ultimately this comes down to, a couple of things. Again, it's building this into your plan. If you want to be charitable, you want to give back to your university, your community, et cetera, wonderful. And we encourage it. Quite frankly, if we're thoughtful about that plan, there can be some really great tax benefits to how you go about that. So it makes a ton of sense to do it, especially if it's very important to you. That intent is where we always start, but it's then building that into your plan, right? And making sure that this is achievable and not going to hurt yourself during your lifetime. And we can't get out of this, and obviously I'm the closest to it, but we can't get out of this of being too generous without talking about our kids. Now I'm a ways away. I'm obviously still doling it out, but it's very acceptable. I got twin 6-year-old daughters and a 7-year-old son. So I understand at some point that is going to continue to be some kind of pain. And so my wife and I, as they grow up, we understand that this is going to be a commitment, that we want to make sure that we're raising kids that are going to be good stewards of their own finances, and they're going to be able to take care of themselves. And just being very clear, and I think this is an important concept that we'll get back to on the wrap up as well. Being very clear about what are gifts, what are loans, how to say no in retirement, and what you want to say yes to. Those are all topics that can get very sticky amongst the family, maybe when mom and dad go into retirement. So those are some of the things that, again, not the complete list. I'm sure there's more things that we could come up with, but those are some of the glaring and obvious things that I consistently come across as major threats to retirement that we want to make sure we're asking ourselves about these questions. Have I thought about this? Have I planned for this? Have I had a discussion about this? So I'm going to talk for just a minute about that idea of supporting retirement. Okay. So there's a bit of a kind of a short laundry list over here. And my point of bringing this up is really thinking about what are those services to support our retirement years. It's all the questions that we probably might be circling around in our head, and we have to focus on at one point or another. And there's no one individual person even that could handle all of these things. It's about building a team. There could be a tax specialist, insurance specialist, an attorney, maybe a wealth planner involved in there to help bring all these things together, ultimately building your team to help you get through and support all those retirement needs and the topics that will come up of importance as you make your way through retirement. And I just want to touch on a couple other things, whether you're working with advisors or not. I just want to share a couple of thoughts. Our world, I'm very clear about our world. It's kind of a world of sameness. If you say I'm looking for an advisor, it feels like we all look the same, we all talk the same. Honestly, it's part of why our team is very adamant about how we're working with coaches like Holly in making this different, making it more meaningful and impactful about how we help people through retirement. And not just focusing on these things, but understanding these are the nuts and bolts that bring some of this stuff together on the financial side. Wrapping it up on this idea of who is it that you partner with, I think the most important thing, and we've done this many, many times over the years, of ask people, just asking people, why'd you choose us? Why do you work with us? Everything always comes back to trust in the relationship. That is paramount. So if you feel complete trust and you have an incredible relationship, that's going to allow you to live through these moments of uncertainty. Because again, we're guaranteed to have them. This year alone could be one of those great years of uncertainty. A small stat around the financial world, 40% of the entire world leaders are up for overturn in one way or another. So obviously it's an election year for us, but if you looked at all the leaders in the world, 40% of them are up for potential change. That is a lot of uncertainty and change, especially in a time where we already feel some geopolitical angst, right? And so in a time of uncertainty, you want to make sure you have that relationship, that you have a lot of trust and a solid foundation that you can have these great discussions. All right, so lastly, I'm going to wrap up, and online here, if you want to scan the QR code. So what this is going to take you to, I'll mention this now and I'll touch on it again at the end real quick, but ultimately this is starting to pull together some of the resources of what we talked about today. So this is what we kind of call our retirement ready workbook. Talks a little bit about helping to build your retirement vision, provides things such as like some of the retirement resources we've talked about around expenses, thinking about ways to account for your Social Security, et cetera. So a lot of great resources within there to help you think about this retirement transition, or are you in a good place when it comes to retirement? So I want to touch though real quick on this quote here. Money is both analytically complex and emotionally fraught. I've touched on this a couple of times around the idea that we can be our own worst enemies. I think we all naturally know the right things to do, but again, our emotions can get in the way of doing the right thing. And so when we think about some of our next steps, things that we can take away from and move forward from here, before I turn it back to Holly, discussing your vision. So we talked about doing this exercise and saying, what is my vision? But again, discussing that vision and your values, having that accountability partner, that could be your spouse, it can be your advisor, making sure that is known, that we're all on the same page. Because at the end of the day, remember, vision, we always say, remember, the vision is what you want to achieve, but values are guardrails to keep you in check, all right? So discussing those vision and values is paramount. Strategize talking about money. Talking about money, I touched on that for a second just a minute ago around your kids. Knowing when to say no, how to say no, and what you want to say yes to. All very important when it comes to your money and success, and quite frankly, your peace of mind as you're making your way through retirement. And then lastly, I want to touch on how you're investing for your vision, for your own vision. This isn't just about the numbers. Honestly, I didn't know you're going to be here tonight, Fred, but I'm going to give you a plug anyways. And you already called it out, your continued learning. One of the first times I met you, you shared your story about how you'd engage with music. This was something that you wanted to achieve in your retirement and you pursued it, right? That's an investment of your time, your dollars, your efforts to go after a vision that you had for yourself. I think that's a great example of things that has nothing to do with, did I buy the S&P 500 or Apple or Facebook or whatever. That's what we think about with investing, but investing for our happiness in retirement can take so many different paths. And the continuous learning, as an example with Fred here, is a great example. My partner, my business partner, Jeff, his big one is he's an avid hiker and explorer of the world. Obviously, he wants to continue that, but he just had his first grandchild. Well, through his years of extreme activity, he's more on the wear out side of my comment. He's worn out both of his knees. So he's in the middle of, he had one complete knee replacement surgery in December. He's having the other one in February. Now, most people would be like, wow, you're gonna do both knees that close. He's so adamant about wanting to be able to be active, being able to crawl around on the floor with his new grandchild, that he's willing to invest the time, the effort, and quite frankly, the pain, as I've watched him go through this, because his health and his physical health is extremely important to him. So we see that as a very important investment, getting him to his vision. Other things like family, your community, right? All the things that you could think of, these are all little investments you can make along the way that aren't necessarily just about dollars and cents. They're ultimately moving you towards that vision that we established in the front end. So just to wrap it up, retiring to something and not away from something. We talked about this. I think Holly mentioned this a little bit around identity, etc. Folks that are running from work because it's stressful. We understand that and we see that, and here's where we want to come back and work on our vision exercises to really set them up for a successful retirement. So with that, again, scan the code if you want to grab the workbook out there. And I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you. Holly?
Thank you.
Great. I can't say how impressed I have always been with Baird. And I think the key piece is that it's an organization that just totally believes in holistic of the people, the clients that they serve, that they are as invested in those people, helping them with the non-financial end and making sure that their people are happy and living fun and, healthy retirements. So they look at the whole picture. It's not just the financial. And the result of that is that they have generation after generations of clients where the kids then are with Baird. And so it's been quite an opportunity to work with them. On a kind of on a funny side note, Ben gave me the names of a couple people that he wanted me to kind of check in with. It was when the stock market had taken a dive. And he said, Holly, he said, I've got a couple people. He said that, maybe you could talk to them about some things that they can do in retirement other than every day just looking at the stock market, because they would look at the numbers and be giving a call to him every day. So it's like, maybe if they had some other things that might interest them. So
There's more to retirement than CNBC, trust me.
right. So just as we kind of finish up here, I did want to talk just for a minute about health and wellness, this arena. And this slide should probably have been the slide that should have come first above all other slides, because it is the foundation for everything. Health and wellness that consists of all the energy that you exert to make your body, to make your mind as fit and healthy as possible. And so without good health, we're not, as somebody mentioned, we're not going to have a real happy and successful retirement. So that's why it is so important to incorporate a wellness plan and a fitness plan into our retirement plan. Just as, again, as an FYI, this McCarthy study that was done, this was about a 10-year study that was done, and it found that how we age is mostly up to us. So what they found is that the study tells us that 70% of physical aging and about 50% of mental aging is determined by the lifestyle choices that we pick. So we certainly have, the ability to make changes there. The first wellness practice is in terms of staying fit, and probably the single most important thing that you can do to enhance your physical health, your brain function, resiliency to disease is one word, and that is exercise. And people are always like, wow, yeah, I know, I've heard that, but that is the number one thing that can truly make a difference. The good news is that it's never too late to get started. You know, you will see significant results if you have never exercised a day in your life and you begin tomorrow. This is also probably the area where the clients that I work with, this is where they want to start. Because for many of them, their physical fitness was maybe neglected, put on the back burner just because their careers, their families, everything else that they have on their schedules, is one thing that's kind of, they have maybe neglected. So they are excited about getting back to that. But as you create your fitness plan, it's important to have that it has both, that you have the aerobics, that you have some strength training in there, and then flexibility training as well. So according to the Institute of Aging, they look at it, and as we're getting older and as we're in retirement, we should be exercising, they say, 1 hour a day. That we should always be breaking a sweat during that exercise. And then they also talk a lot, and you've probably read a lot, that the best way to keep that program going is by doing things that you're really going to enjoy. That's where I hear people talk about, you know, pickleball, different things that they enjoy doing, so that it isn't just thinking, oh, I have to go and I know that I need to do this, but finding those things. And then another one is eating healthy. The Institute also talks about, as we age, we should probably look at the Mediterranean type diets. And then the other one is with our sleep. And they're saying, as we age, they talk about 7 to 9 hours of good sleep every night is what their recommendation is. So how many of you have an exercise routine? Okay. But you have it, okay. All right, what about our online people? And yours, I saw you nodding at one point, you're still working.
Yeah,
You're probably in that, yeah, I know, and
when will I do it?
yes, exactly.
Take a look.
Uh-huh.
Oh, dear.
Cindy's working on it online.
Okay, good. The other piece then is staying mentally fit. And it's all about, when I think about our memory, dementia is not something that necessarily has to happen. We naturally think that, oh, we're going to get to a point where dementia is going to set in. That is not the case, especially in recent research that's out there. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, you might have heard about him during the pandemic. He did a lot of stuff about, you know, came on talking about health. But he has written a book called Keep Sharp, Build a Better Brain at Any Age. Fabulous book, really, really good one. But he talks about, throughout the book, he talks about different studies that have been done. And he talks about how doing something that challenges your brain and doing that every day. Because what happens as we age with our brain is that if we stop challenging it, like at work, we're all, you know, many times we're in jobs that absolutely challenge the brain. That once we're away from that, that part of the brain can kind of atrophy. And so that's when we see the dementia, that kind of thing. So his recommendation is just keep challenging yourself. He suggests doing things like picking up a new hobby, maybe playing a musical instrument if you've never done something like that. Taking a class is a great way to improve that cognitive function. And technology, that's where a lot of people have worked, have done things in that area. But really being fearless in learning new things and doing things even a little differently. One thing that he suggested was brushing your teeth with your other hand. So if you use your dominant hand, start to brush your teeth with your other hand. That even that small kind of shifts like that will cause the brain to really start to work. So that is, that's another area. And then we've already talked a little bit about the relationships and how important those are. And then leisure is one of the other arenas. And that is all about, you know, where are you going to spend time? What are those things you're going to, that you want to do when you don't have to do anything at all? Statistics say that people have a hard time with leisure. That it's not something that, you know, we're
40
good
years
at.
ago, I had a book entitled When I Relax, I Feel Guilty.
No, that could be, yeah.
And I know that was
Yes.
true. That was why I bought the book. It was like, I could have written that title, you know?
Right.
And it was really hard even to just take a day off, you know?
Mhm.
This back when I was a pastor, so I felt like I
Yeah.
was letting people down, letting God down if I took a day off.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's very true in here in the United States, with our culture. That's very true. But we do know that leisure is as important as all of the other areas, that we really need to do things to plan in that category.
The physiology of muscles tensing and relaxing, I mean, your heart does that constantly.
Yeah.
And so at a macro level, you need to do that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if you like to watch TV?
Well, yes, leisure, as I said, it's activities, anything that when you don't have to do anything at all. Now, what kind of TV and how much are we talking? That's why you don't have your roommates come.
Full disclosure.
Yeah, okay, okay, that are thought provoking,
Well,
maybe?
about Julia Child.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
You know, further classes, movies, great. Like old movies,
Yeah.
run movies.
But then it's like, oh, before do we like to watch some really good show? Because they're good, that's why we like to watch them.
And
And I know that's
sometimes, well, no, I think, you know, it is leisure. But it's always a good idea to try to think of some other things that you can do in that category. Questions sometimes that you might ask yourself when you're thinking about leisure. What have you always wished you had time for? That's one that I often will ask people. What activities over the past decade brought you the most joy? Is there anything there that you could do? What new things can you do now that you have more time? You know, that maybe you never had, that you didn't have time to explore when you were right in the midst of your career. So there's a lot of things that can go into the leisure. The other part of it is personal development. And this is at its core, personal development entails becoming all that you can become. So it's expressing your gifts, your talents, your abilities to the best, you know, that you can. And so this is the area too, where we tend to think that once we're retired, that this is not as important. it is more so. It is more important in retirement than it was during our working years. Because this is the area that will prevent us from kind of wearing away. That's what's helping to keep our brain sharp. And so it is important to think of some things in this area that you can do. Here at Otterbein, wow, we've got a lot of opportunities, and they are building more and more programs for alumni that are going to be fabulous in this area of continuing education. And you see a lot more of that opening up on different courses that are available to you that you don't have to pay for. Ohio State has programs that once you're 65, you can go, you can take a class. It doesn't cost you anything. So there's Otterbein, yes, this learning, and any questions that you might have on things like that, Dana, can help us with on that. But it's great to see those kind of things, more of that coming up. And then the last thing that I had was, this is just an activity that many times I will work with my clients on. And they have found that sometimes this is helpful when they try to think of things, what can I really kind of sink my teeth into? Something that I would enjoy doing. And so these are 3 of the ways that you can do that. And just, again, looking at some of those activities that you may have done at one time, put on the back burner for whatever reason, and bringing those back out. The other one is repurposing your talents or your skills. So think about all those skill sets that you used in your career. How can you repurpose that in another area that you might have an interest in? And where I see this is a lot of times people looking at their volunteer work saying, okay, you have some accounting skills. I have this, I like doing those things. How could I find a volunteer opportunity where I could use some of my skill sets? And then the other is trying something absolutely brand new. Just kind of creating a list of things that you're good at, things that interest you, and then just going for it and really trying some of these things out. And then as we end, we didn't have time really to talk about purpose today. Dana and I had talked earlier as we were getting ready. And this summer, I'm hoping to do a session that's going to be all on purpose. How do you find your purpose? Ben talked about it. It is so important. We know just from studies that when we know what our purpose is, when we find that they say it extends 7 years onto your life, when we know our purpose, that we have a healthier heart, that it helps our mind, it helps against depression. So we know that these studies have found that people are just much happier and much healthier when they know what their purpose is. So we'll be doing a session. Anybody who's interested in that, let Dana know, and we'll be sure to contact you when that comes out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just wanted to open it up now for any questions that you would have for me or that you have for Ben.
Yeah. I did think of a question. This
Yeah.
is just something that's been on my mind, just with the crazy housing market and prices in Columbus and just inflation and the cost of things. And I keep thinking, are we like the next San Francisco, where it's so incredibly expensive to live here with Intel coming and all the industry that are now finding a home in Columbus? I mean, it's really booming. It's good. It's great in a lot of ways. Maybe, I don't know, but I have to admit, I'm a little bit worried. I've got a college sophomore, and want her to come back here, but less and less is Columbus. Are we gonna be able to afford to live here at some point? What are you hearing?
I guess I
One of the things that we do is, we work with families all across the country. And it's usually because they've navigated it well, right? And then maybe we'll fill a pocket of folks. And when you start talking about that, Dana, the first thing that comes to mind is a group of families we work with around the Seattle area. And when you go to Seattle and you might be catching an Uber driver here or there, getting around town to visit folks. I can't tell you how many folks I've talked to there that have said that they've had to navigate further and further out or just outright leave. And I can't say that there is a great solution to it other than that this is happening all around the country. And quite frankly, it's part of what is bringing a lot of people to Columbus, because someone in San Francisco, and we've heard stories of this, you hear a lot of these people that say, I'm paying, all cash for a $500,000 or $600,000 home. And everybody's like, how are you paying cash? It's because they sold a $2 million home in San Francisco and bought a larger home with a backyard for a fraction of the cost, and they had all the equity in their home. So, it's not a settling answer or, a good answer, but I will tell you that this is what we're seeing all around the country. And I think it's part of, again, being thoughtful about, am I going to be here in retirement? What does my retirement look like? Is it going to be a different house, smaller house, different location? Am I going to try to stay where my kids are? Or am I trying to get my kids to come back here? These are all those kind of discussions that we have with families when preparing for what retirement looks like in housing. Great question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Other questions?
think I have.
No, I just want to thank Holly for getting me involved in tap dancing. And now I'm at Tai Chi. So it's very inspirational.
Wow.
So my question is this, clearly there's a path that makes sense. And that, when you're 20 or 30 and you get on this path and you're saving money and you're paying attention to all this, and then you get to 65 and 70 and you get to kind of go from there. But I'm willing to bet money that not many people have that direct kind of path, because for many people, life happens in different ways. And so it's not all stuff that's under your control. Some of it's stuff that happened that we didn't expect to happen, or that we didn't plan for, from health to bad marriage to kids being sick, whatever. But it changes the way that looks. And I think, to me, that's the part that I'm still sort of mystified by, is how do you cover, how do you figure out how to move forward from there? And so an example that I can use as myself is, I didn't become a parent until I was in my 40s. Now, when you start in your 40s, you ain't done in your 60s.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's a really good path. And, and throughout my lifespan as a parent, I have been out of sync with where everybody else is. So.
And the other area of that, and Ben knows, we did a workshop for some people who were caregivers. So here are people that are clients that are ready to retire, but really can't think about their retirement right now, because now they're taking care of mom and dad.
Or a
So
spouse.
they've gone, yes, or spouse, so they've jumped into that. And how do they work through all of those kinds of things? Kids coming back home to live, all of those kind of things can have a huge impact.
And I could summarize it with basically saying, it's like heading out on a road trip and you find a detour along the way. We understand that planning, you're gonna hit detours along the way, but it's part of the idea that planning is not a one-time event. It's a continued living, breathing thing, because we understand there's no way you make assumptions for 30 years of what your life looks like or what kind of circumstances you're gonna be dealt. And so 100% understand your feeling and yeah, so it's a great call out because it sounds as if we're projecting this vision and you just follow that
Yeah,
path forever.
right.
That's
Not
not
that easy.
reality. It gives you some grounding at time, right? But we understand that we have to take detours from time to time to continue to evolve and follow. our vision.
I think Ben and I, we were very surprised at some of the things that people are faced with. You know,
Yeah.
it was a real eye opener to
For sure.
hear all the different struggles that people were having in different areas.
Yeah, that's where they say life happens while you're making plans, right?
Mhm.
Well, let's give
Holly and Ben
Okay.
a big round of
Thank you.
applause. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for being.